What's going on, everybody? All right, it's Wednesday, and the beauty of Wednesday, the beauty of these Q&A episodes is that you all get to pick the topics. Whatever you guys want to talk about, hear my thoughts on, share your thoughts on, it's all wrapped around what you all come up with. So remember, if you have a question or a topic you want discussed on an upcoming Wednesday episode, submit it. Submit it down below in the comments, and I will absolutely put it on the list, and I will continue to work my way through the list. And again, some weeks I get 10 submissions, some weeks I get 5. So it might be a week or 2 or 3 before I get to them sometimes. It might be that week. It just kind of depends on what's submitted. And but again, it's like, when you have a channel and you put out videos, you're kind of just guessing on what people are interested in. You don't really know. I tend to put out things that I'm kind of interested in, and then I hope you all are interested as well. But this is awesome because you all get to decide what it is we're talking about. And because of that, each and every week, it's a surprise to me. It's a surprise to me what we're going to talk about. And there are sometimes that there are questions that I get really excited to answer. I'm like, ooh, that's a really good one. And then there are sometimes that I'm like, I wonder if there are a ton of people that are interested in this or just a few. Regardless, if you have a topic that you want brought up, again, down in the comments, please bring it up. Now, halfway through the week, middle of the week, we can get there. We're closing in on the weekend. So let's take a look at the first question. And this is an interesting one, a really interesting one. Let's check out the first question here. A question for your Q&A. Why is it assumed that PSA's new harsh grading standard means that the old standard was too lenient? Maybe the old standard was just fine, but the new standard is excessively tough and may not stay that way. A response in the comments said, I've been thinking the exact same. The old standards were better from grade to grade. The new standards reflect microscopic differences between grades 7 through 10 and massive differences between grades 1 through 4. Why the huge disparity between the high and low grades? They should go back to making it an even progression. All right, grading controversy. This, I know that people say, man, why do we talk about grading a lot? It's not just grading like with the grading companies. It's agreeing on conditions. Every day when there is a deal being made, there is a buyer, there is a seller, and they probably don't see the cards exactly the same. They probably have a slightly different opinion of the grade, the condition, the value as a result. What is mint? What is near mint? What is near mint? What is ex mint? What is poor? What is good? And everything in between. And I know that people talk about, there's all this controversy about grading. This is not a new topic. This is not a new topic at all. And that's part of the intricacies of vintage cards, because most modern cards, they're 8s, 9s, or 10s. There might be a printer line, there might be a touch on some corners, there might be some centering issues. But the deviation between a really nice modern card and a not so nice modern card, it's not that much. But the difference in pre-war cards and vintage cards is so wide. Now, I was looking through this Beckett Monthly. This is from 1986. And I referenced this the other day when I was on Hobby Hotline on 4 Collectors Network with Dr. Beckett. And there was an article that he wrote. And again, this is August of 1986. And the article is called The Grading Controversy. And he wrote a whole article about, what is a mint card? What is a near mint card? And the differences between different companies. and different graders and different dealers. And he referenced his definition of each, and then he referenced another publication opinion. And you can see right here in the dark gray boxes, they have the definitions of each. But look at in the middle. He was hosting at the 1986 National. He hosted basically a discussion about grading. And that's part of the thing about grading is a person's definition of near mint might be different than another's. Now, a lot of the times people talk about PSA versus SGC and the differences between the two. We have to keep in mind, and I've done videos on this, but if you go side by side, what does near mint mean SGC versus PSA? What does X mint mean SGC versus PSA? There are a lot of similarities. In fact, the verbiage is very similar in some cases, but there are differences. So when people say, well, is SGC just going to cross all of their slabs over to PSA at some point? Because, if SGC were to dissolve. Well, probably not. And one of the reasons probably not is because a 4 is not the same definition for SGC grading as it is PSA grading. But that's not the question here. It sets the stage, though. It's the prelude for the conversation here, because not even grading companies have the same definitions. Different grading companies have different definitions. And something that I brought up with Dr. Beckett, something I've brought up with a few people, is when you enter in new technologies, it affects what you can see versus what you can't see. And in some ways that might make grading more accurate with the new technologies, but in some ways it's putting a more stringent eye on a card that might be seeing things that otherwise wouldn't have been seen, which, in my opinion, means that grading is harder. Now, again, I've mentioned all this before. Now, I want to put a card on the screen here. So on the screen, I've got a Dandy early win card. Now, keep in mind a couple of things. Dandy cards went into potato chip bags. So they commonly have grease stains. They commonly have like a filmy surface because of that. They have some issues. Now, this card was graded quite a while ago, and I know that because of the flip, which you'll see here in a second. But I want you to look at this card. And I'm telling you right now, it was graded years ago. What grade do you think that this card should receive? And what grade do you think this card did receive? Okay, again, an early win Dandy card. Now what I want you to do is see how it graded. Did anybody out there think that that card was going to get a 5? Because when I look at it, I see some paper loss issues on the front. I see some paper loss issues on the back. I see substantial dirt and grease on the back and the front. I see quite a bit of damage to this card. But years ago, this card got a 5. Now, did it get a 5 because it's a Dandy card? And at that time, when they were grading Dandy cards, they said, well, we know it's going to have grease. We know it's going to have surface issues because all of the Dandy cards, not all, most Dandy cards have those sorts of issues. So we're going to grade it per the standard of what a Dandy card is expected to have. Is that what happened? Because if you look on PSA's grading standards and you look at what a 5 represents, that card is not described by what a 5 is on the PSA website. So is it that they graded the card too easy? Is it that they graded the card correctly and now we're just grading too hard? And this question basically is asking that concept. Is it that back in the day they graded them too easy and now is right? Or is it that back in the day they graded them correctly and now it's too hard? Ultimately, I think that's where the consumer gets to come in. The reason that you send a card to a grading company or you buy a card in a certain grading company's holder is because you subscribe to their opinions. You know, if there are grading companies out there that you don't trust, you probably don't buy cards in those grading companies' holders, right? I mean, there are smaller grading companies that a lot of us, if you saw a card in a holder in a case at a card show, you probably would go, I don't think I'm going to buy it just because I don't really know what to think of that holder. And I don't know if that company has some shenanigans. I don't know if that company is legit. I don't really trust that company. But if you buy cards in PSA holders, to a certain extent, you're saying, I trust the evaluation, or I like the card a lot, and I think that their evaluation took into account the things that would concern me and relieve that concern from me. I think that if people feel that PSA is now grading much harder than they used to, or if people feel that PSA's grading standards have gotten tougher, then what it might mean is, and what it means for me, because I subscribe to the theory that they are grading harder than they used to. And one of the things that did for me, it didn't make me go, well, I don't trust PSA anymore. I don't trust their old grades. I only trust their new grades, or vice versa. What it meant to me is cards during the tenure when they weren't grading as harsh, I need a little bit of a higher grade for it to be the standard that I'm okay with. So like, for example, in a card from the 50s, maybe my threshold is in that 4 range, like that X-Mint, kind of X-Mint VG sort of range. Well, if it was graded in 1995, that might have been more like a 5 grade. And now it might be more like a 3 range. And so I have to, and I said this ad nauseum, to me, the number is a suggestion. The number is one series of opinions based on some of the qualities about the card. And then I have to buy a card that I like or don't like. If they're grading harder, then, which I believe to be true, I'm way more open-minded to a lower number, because to me, a lower number is still a better card than that number. So there was a time where I'd say, I want cards kind of in that 6 range. The 6 range is kind of the sweet spot to me because it's not super expensive. It's got a lot of positive qualities to it. But now, because I feel that they're grading a little bit more harsh, I'm more looking in the 4 range. And that is a very, in most cases, a really high quality card. 4, 5. So again, I don't think we should continue to get too caught up in the number itself and the number that was assigned from the grading company. Instead, what I think we should be doing is focusing on the card, using the number as a clue or a piece of information toward our own conclusion of the quality of the card. And for me, in the current grading process that's happening, a card that is being graded right now, I am very, very open to a card in the 3-4 range from the 1950s, whereas maybe 10 years ago or 15 years ago, I would have been looking more in that 6 range. So again, I think the number doesn't matter a ton. I think as we move forward, the number is going to matter less and less and less. And what we actually think of the card itself, our own opinion of the card, is going to be the primary factor in determining the value and the demand of the card.
This one says, "Hello, this is Roy. I have been away from most card content for a while. Here is a simple, low-impact question for you. I am beginning to get interested in some modern players. There is a sweet spot in a star player's career where interest slacks off in their cards. I'm thinking right before a player retires, you could possibly pick a few key cards well before any Hall of Fame hype."
All right, I think this is a super interesting concept. I totally hear where you're coming from. You're saying, I want cards of guys that are going to be Hall of Famers, and I want cards of guys when they're not red hot. Now, years ago, Clayton Kershaw and Justin Verlander, for example, were like absolutely dominating players, dominating pitchers in the league. But over the last couple of years, they are still active, but they have not been as much in the forefront of the Cy Young races. They've not been in the forefront of superstars. Though they're still quality players, they're not getting a lot of attention at the moment. And what it sounds like what you're saying is when a player is in the core peak of their career, and when a player is entering the Hall of Fame or just entered the Hall of Fame, there's a lot of attention around them. And with that attention tends to be some demand. So I think what you're suggesting is if you buy a future Hall of Famer of a guy who's toward the end of his career, when he's not getting a lot of attention, and before the Hall of Fame attention comes in, then you might get a pretty good deal on some of their cards. I think to a certain extent that's true. I think to a certain extent. But here's the thing. I think we all know and have known that Albert Pujols was going to make the Hall of Fame. I think we all know Verlander and Kershaw are going to make the Hall of Fame. We knew Ichiro was going to make the Hall of Fame. A lot of guys over the last 10 years that when it got to the twilight of their career, we knew they were going to make the Hall of Fame. We knew Derek Jeter would make the Hall of Fame. We knew Mariano Rivera would make the Hall of Fame. We knew that. So I think, personally, a lot of the Hall of Fame value has already been baked into the price. I think that people don't go, oh, well, I'm going to grab some Ichiro cards before Ichiro makes the Hall of Fame. We all know he's going to make the Hall of Fame, so people have already built that in my opinion. So what I think happens is a lot of people who collect Hall of Famers, what they do is they look out and they go, who's going to make the Hall of Fame? And I want to get their card before they make the Hall of Fame because it could make their price go up. CC Sabathia, okay? I knew I wanted a CC Sabathia card because I like CC Sabathia. Now, CC Sabathia was, to me, clearly going to make the Hall of Fame. It was just a matter of whether he was a first or a second ballot Hall of Famer. And 4 years ago, he wasn't really getting any attention. He wasn't in the news. But then when he makes the Hall of Fame, he's in the news. And when he was pitching in the playoffs, he was making a lot of news. So there is a little bit of a lull. I think the question comes down to, or at least my question back is, are you looking to buy a card that you would want anyway as a long-term card in your collection? Or are you trying to speculate on a card that you think will go up in value when they make the Hall of Fame? Because if what you're trying to do is speculate for a guy who's going to make the Hall of Fame, I think a lot of players, their cards don't really go up when they make the Hall of Fame. I think that it's expected in many cases. The guys who we don't know are going to make the Hall of Fame and then are kind of a surprise, or guys that are maybes going to make the Hall of Fame and then they do make the Hall of Fame, that's where there tends to be a little bit of a bump. But when Rickey Henderson retired, we knew he was making the Hall of Fame. So when he made the Hall of Fame, his card probably didn't move much. And I've done some episodes on this concept. The guys whose cards jumped a lot were more Veterans Committees guys. Like when Minnie Minoso got in, when Ted Simmons got in, when Gil Hodges got in, when guys like that get in, it's sort of like, oh, this guy made the Hall of Fame. And now Dave Parker's cards have gone up, right? Dave Parker autographs and autographed rookies have gone up. And I think that the reason for that is that we weren't sure if they'd make it, but when a guy makes the Hall of Fame, it's not like suddenly he's a better player. It's that there's more demand because there are some people who collect cards of Hall of Famers. And if you're not in the Hall of Fame, there are a certain number of people who won't collect your cards because they only collect Hall of Famers or they want all Hall of Famer cards. And as soon as you make the Hall of Fame, then boom, all of a sudden the demand goes up. And when the demand goes up, the price tends to go up. But guys like Ichiro, Verlander, Kershaw, stuff like that, I don't really think that there's this like great deal in lull right now because I think people know, yeah, Pujols is going to make the Hall of Fame. So people have already bought up his cards as if he was already in. There might be a slight jump when he gets in just because there's some attention and people go, oh yeah, Pujols, I need to go get some of his cards. But then I think that kind of lulls back down to where it was. So I guess it kind of depends on what the point of it is. If the point is that you want to buy cards when they're not super hot, but they're cards you want in your collection anyway, totally makes sense to buy Verlanders right now and Kershaws right now and Goldschmidts like that and guys like that right now. But I don't think that there's going to be this surge in value in a few years when they're Hall of Fame eligible. But again, that's just my take.
This question says, if a card is cracked out of a slab and resubmitted, the grading company would be obligated to regrade the card, even though they can identify that they have already assigned a grade to that card. Anytime a card is cracked out of a slab, there is always a chance that card was damaged during the slab cracking process, so it would need to be reevaluated. Now, it does beg the question, should the card be able to receive a higher grade than the one it previously assigned? If so, how many grade points above the previous grade would be acceptable? Is it fair if there was a true mistake when the original grade was assigned?
This is such a complicated question. There are so many variables here. I agree with your point about when a card is cracked out of a slab and then resubmitted, it's very possible that the grade could and would change because it's possible that the card got damaged during the crack out process. And so I could see a card going down in number because it was cracked out. So just because a card is cracked out and resubmitted does not mean it should get at least the same grade that it got before. As long as we have a human being using their judgment and some fairly vague descriptions of what qualifies for certain grades, there's always going to be a variance from one grade to the next. I could take a card, I could crack it out, I could resubmit it, and it could get a huge swing up or down. Again, we know this, they know this, they talk about this, we talk about this. But the point, the takeaway, in my opinion, the takeaway from this right here is everything. Here's the takeaway. That is the reason that we shouldn't give so much validation and credit to the grade. The fact that the grade could change is the fact that the grades do change is what makes it insane when a card goes from an 8 to a 9, how the price just goes through the roof. On a vintage card, if a card gets an 8 versus a card gets a 9, the value of that card goes exponentially higher. And if a card goes from a 9 to a 10, exponentially higher, especially for vintage cards, which is, again, the takeaway. The point is that is crazy because on a given day, that 10 could be an 8 or a 9. That 9 could be a 10 or an 8. Yet the amounts that people are paying for the premium from one to the other, when there may not be a difference. I mean, literally, except for how the card was viewed on that particular day. So I don't really know what is acceptable for a card to go up or down. I mean, again, ideally, see, when you go to McDonald's and you get a Big Mac, and you get a Big Mac and you're in Kansas City, Missouri, or you go to Seattle, Washington, and you get a Big Mac, or you go to Anaheim, California, and you get a Big Mac, it's pretty similar because their standards and their processes for how they put the sandwich or the burger together is very, very similar. The ingredients are the same. The portions are virtually the same. But there are sometimes you go to a McDonald's, you go, that wasn't a very good one. That was not a very good one. They were kind of lazy on that one. That bread was a little bit old on that one. Whatever it is. So there's always going to be a variance whenever a human is involved in the process. So what should be allowed? Again, if we want, just like balls and strikes, if we want balls and strikes to be called perfectly, then a computer can do it. But if we want a human being to do it, there are going to be times where there are mistakes. So do we want a mistake-free computer-based system? We have tag. At least for modern, we have tag. If you want a human being to do it, we have some other grading companies. So I am certainly not defending the grading companies. I have issue with a 7 being cracked and resubmitted and coming back a 9 or vice versa. I have issues with that. But ultimately, the reason it's such a big deal, that a card goes from a 7 to a 9 or a 9 to a 7, that really shouldn't matter that much. The reason it matters is because we, the secondary consumer, the third-party consumer, the person who comes along the line after the fact, is willing to pay so much more because it has a 9 instead of because it has a 7. That's the reason it's a big deal. Ultimately, it's our fault. If we bought cards with our eyes, if we bought cards that we liked, instead of gave so much of the power away to the grading companies, it wouldn't really matter if it changed from an 8 to a 9. If people were buying cards without looking at the grade, therefore it's the same card, you should be just as willing to buy the card that has a 9, which you don't know it's a 9, or an 8, which you don't know it's an 8, simply by, what if the grading companies did that? What if the grading companies didn't put the number on the slab? What if the grading companies just had it where if you looked up the serial number, then you'd see the grade? Wouldn't that be better? Would that be better? Would you look in a case and go, oh my gosh, that's a beautiful 1958 Mickey Mantle. And then you run the serial number and you go, never mind. It's just a 3. Wouldn't that be crazy? If you looked into a case and you didn't know the grade, I think it's interesting. I think it's an interesting thought. There was one more piece from this that I wanted to, is it fair that they make actual mistakes? I've thought a lot about this too. I've thought, well, wait a second. If I have a 4 and I crack it out and I send it back in and it gets a 7, they made a massive mistake either the first time or the second time. So why should I have to pay for them to regrade a card that they later acknowledge is wrong by 3 grades? Wouldn't it be in the grading company's best interest to grade harshly? Because if they grade harshly, you might crack it and resubmit it to be graded again. And then maybe when it gets graded again, maybe that time it gets graded more accurately or more fairly. If you're the grading company, What is better for your business? What is better for your submissions? Is it to give you a good grade where you're like, great, it got a 9? I'm not cracking this out because it looked like a 7 to me. Or if it's the 7, that they give a 5. Because if it should have gotten a 7, but they give it a 5, aren't you more likely to crack it and try it again? Aren't you willing to go back up and pay a second time to have that card get evaluated? I actually think for repeat business' sake, it's actually better for them to grade harshly because then you're more willing to resubmit it to them. The only way to break this cycle that we're in, this snowball, this circle, this hurricane, this blizzard is if we finally start going, I don't care that card has a 9 on it. It looks like a 7 to me, so I'm only going to pay 7 prices. And I don't care that card has a 7 on it. It looks like a 9 to me, so I'm going to pay 9 prices. Until that happens, the grading companies will continue to have a ton of power over us. And that's on us. That's not on them. That is on us.
This one says, Bravo picking PA. Being an hour north of Philly makes it real nice to go to so many great shows within a few hours' drive. Strongsville is only 7 hours, which makes it a nice weekend getaway. So many professional and minor league teams in the area. Plus, fall is beautiful this time of year. Anyway, if you were setting up at your first big card show, which cards would you get to fill your cases? Your mission is to sell the cards at their fair market value and to sell at least 95% of your inventory. Which cards would you choose that are very popular and always in demand? Thanks.
This is a super fun question. If I were a dealer and I had to sell 95% of my inventory and I had to sell it at comps. Now, there are a lot of assumptions in here and a lot of things I don't know. So I feel like I don't have all the information in order to give the best answer I can give. So if it was a local card show, I would say I would fill my cases, like where I live, I would fill my cases with Steph Curry cards, refractor Currys, insert Currys, refractor and insert Jordans, refractor and insert Brock Purdy's, refractor and insert Jerry Rice's, and a bunch of Pokemon cards. if it was where I live. Now, if it was at the National, and I think that your question is like, okay, you're going to the National, a major show, there's going to be tons of traffic, there's going to be people with money. What would you fill your cases with to make sure that you sell 95% of your inventory at fair market value? Now, the first thing is, what is fair market value? Is it fair market value for the grade, or is it fair market value for the eye appeal? Since most people consider the comps based 99% on the grade, I'm going to go with that. Now, I don't subscribe to that. I subscribe to the card. That said, what I think I would do is if I was at the National, how could I sell out my cases at the National? Here's what I would do. I would have centered, and I would have high eye appeal centered. Jackie Robinson's, Ty Cobb's, Cy Young's, Babe Ruth's, Lou Gehrig's, Mickey Mantle's, Hank Aaron's, Willie Mays's. Did I say Jackie yet? Jackie Robinson's, if I didn't say Jackie yet. Centered, high color, high eye appeal. If I took those cards of those players, and Walter, okay, I know I'm going to get yelled at for leaving. Walter Johnson, probably 2. Christy Mathewson, 2. I know I'm leaving out a big name or 2, but Joe DiMaggio, centered, good color, good eye appeal. If I took out a bunch of Cobbs, Ruths, Gehrigs, Jackies, Mantles, Mazes, Aarons, Clementes, all the guys I just listed, and the cards were centered high eye appeal, and I put them at middle of the comp for the grade, I'd sell out. I would absolutely sell out of all of those guys. Now, there are other players that are popular. There are other players that are good. There are players I didn't mention that are better than some of the players that I did. But the demand really kind of comes down to about 10 main players. And if the card is centered and the card has high eye appeal and you have it priced with comps of the number on the slab, those things will get eaten up. I'd sell out my cases on day one of the National. That's what I would do. I would just absolutely clean up. But I think the people who bought from me, who bought those players, centered high eye appeal at middle comp for the number, those people would do better than I would do. Because I think long term, those cards are going to continue selling more and more and more than their same grade counterparts. I really believe that. So I hope I answered the question correctly, or I hope I answered the question in a way you were hoping for me to answer it.
And Andrew says, "Hi, Greg. I was wondering, when you sell cards or get rid of, does it make you appreciate your collection more? You mentioned in the MidLife live stream about quality versus quantity. So what do you find and believe the difference to be in a collector versus a hoarder? Is it the passion and time being carefully curated the collection? Have you ever held on to cards that you don't like longer than you should have? Hoping to hear facts, but will accept your opinions. However, I can't be responsible for how other people will perceive them. Thanks, Greg."
All right, Andrew. So I feel like there's a few things I want to make sure that I'm clarifying. First of all, I don't think that there's a right or a wrong way to do this hobby. I really don't. I really don't have any. I have so much respect for a guy like Chris from Missouri who wants to have every card of every Hall of Famer. I believe Chris has every Hall of Fame rookie card post-war, I believe. And he has most cards, the full runs of most Hall of Famers post-war. Mike Moynihan said the other day, a couple of weeks ago, his goal is to have every Topps card, every base Topps card ever created. Now, that collecting that way doesn't work for me. That does not mean that their way of collecting is an incorrect way to collect. I love that they collect that way. I think that's fantastic. But that's not for me. For me, I want to have a number of cards that I'm able to enjoy. And when I have boxes and boxes and boxes and boxes and binders and binders and binders of cards, that's too many for me with my lifestyle, with my attention span, with my brain capacity to be able to actually enjoy. So for me, I am more of a collector who would like to have a couple hundred to 50 like cards that I really like those, than to have thousands and thousands and thousands of cards. That doesn't make me better than anyone. That doesn't mean that I'm doing it the right way and someone else is doing it the wrong way. One of the things that came up on the live stream was, the hoarder style of collecting. For whatever reason, that term is thought of as like a negative connotation. It might be because isn't there like a TV show on like TLC where they go into like hoarders' houses and the people are just there's just rats everywhere and stuff. If that's the case, a hoarder style of collector to me is not intended to be a disrespectful thing. If it is, then we need to come up with a new term. A broad collector versus a narrow collector, maybe. I don't know. But it's not that a person who collects broadly, like Chris and Mike, they're not doing it wrong. So maybe it's the term, the connotation behind the term of hoarder that sounds like a negative thing. That is not a negative thing. I love that. I love that Keith of Lonely Basement Baseball Cards, I love that he wants to collect like every card of every Yankee. That's fantastic. That's not for me, but that's fantastic that he does it that way. There are some people who like to collect lots of different sets and some just certain players. To say that Theo, Clemente collector, is collecting wrong because 95% of his collection is Clemente, he's not wrong. He's having fun. So I feel like I'm kind of defending myself in the question, and it's not intended to defend. There's nothing to defend. It's just a different way of doing it. If you want cards that are ungraded, fantastic. If you want cards that are graded, fantastic. If you want SGC, great. PSA, great. Some people care about grading. We just had 2 questions of the 5 this week about grading questions. And some people are like, I don't care about grading. Grading's the devil. Well, great. Fast forward through those responses because you don't care about those things. That's fantastic. I love Wednesdays because Wednesdays, you all get to tell me what you all are interested in hearing about. And I think that if you want to hear my take or other people's takes or start a discussion down in the chat, down below in the comments about these topics, that's fantastic. So to answer the rest of the question, and I typed it out because I'm like, you seem like I was going to be skipping some things. So I'm going to try. Is the passion and the time carefully curating a collection? Is it the passion and the time being carefully curating the collection? I don't know if a person who has a broad collection or a narrow collection, I don't think that one is curating more than another. Like for me, I'm super picky with the cards that I add to my collection. So there have been many, many times that I've passed on cards that other people, why didn't you buy that one? I didn't like the looks of it. I'm curating differently than Keith when he's going through a quarter box looking for some 1986 Topps Yankee cards that he's missing. It's a different type of curation. And his is not better and mine is not better. You said, have you ever held on to cards that you don't like longer than you should have? I think that there are times that I have been afraid that if I sold the card, I would regret selling it. And so I hold on to it so I don't have regret. Do I have actual examples of that? So when my dad went through, so a lot of you all have seen the episode where my dad was at an estate sale and he came home with a shoebox full of cards and that he bought, and he ended up selling some of them and keeping some of them and sending some to SGC, and it was like this, estate sale find. And at the end of, after the cameras were off and stuff, I went through the cards and I bought a couple of the cards from my dad. Like, just said, hey, what do you want for this card? Are you going to keep this card? No. Okay, what would you sell it for? I don't know. And one of the cards I bought was a 58 Topps Sandy Koufax. Okay. And it's a really nice, the color on the card is fantastic. I should have grabbed it, but I didn't. Color on it's really nice. It's a great picture of Sandy Koufax. I really like Sandy Koufax. And I sent the card in to SGC, and I think it came back a 4.5. I kind of thought it might be higher, but it's about 75-25 centering. And so it came back as a 4.5. And a 4.5 1958 Sandy Koufax with that kind of color is got some value. And you asked me for facts, Andrew. I'm giving you an exact example. And so part of me is like, this card doesn't really fit with how I'm collecting right now. I'm going heavily after rarer things, centered things. A lot of the cards from the 50s and 60s that I had, I've liquidated to buy some of the T206 cards I'm going after and some of the other sets that I've been putting together, some of my pirate cards. So like a lot of the cards from the 60s I sold. I used the money to buy some of the pirate cards when I was building that pirate set. And so the Sandy Koufax card doesn't really fit with what I'm doing anymore. And part of me is like, I kind of want to sell it because I don't know. Let's say it's a $200 card in a 4.5. I'm like, I'd rather put that $200 towards something else. Like something else. Like I want a Hank Aaron rookie someday. I'd rather take that $200 and put it toward a Hank Aaron rookie. But I'm afraid that I'll regret selling the card that I have from that memory of that day with my dad. And so sometimes the emotional attachment to a card prevents me from selling a card because that card means more to me than the value that card could result my pocketbooks with. So should I have sold that card? A lot of you are saying, no way, you can never sell that card. Some of you are saying, well, yeah, of course you should sell the card. If it doesn't really fit with your collection, liquidate it and put it towards something that does. Neither one of you is wrong. So have I hung on to cards longer than I should have? I think, historically speaking, the cards that people hang on to longer than they should have are prospect cards. I don't have any Wander Franco cards, but if I did, I hung on to them too long. I don't have any Todd Van Poppel cards. I don't have any Ben McDonald cards. I don't have any Matt Noakes cards. I don't have any, who else? I mean, we could all go to Kevin Moss, Jerome Walton. There are a lot of guys that if I still had their cards, you could make the argument, I hung on too long. But I don't have a lot of those cards. So I don't think I've hung on to any cards too long because for me, once the card means more to somebody else than it does to me, that's usually when I sell. And I do sell from time to time. Did I answer everything? I think I answered everything. I hope I gave you some facts. I hope I did a good job. Thank you if you're still listening to me today. It's gone a little long today. If you're still listening, I appreciate a little long today. I know. It's just this is what I do. If you have a question for an upcoming episode, down in the comments, please leave your question. I would be happy and honored to take the opportunity to share my thoughts about that topic.